Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 545 of the Riverfront Cincinnati Reds podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am Nate Dotson, and oh man, do we ever have plenty to talk about today with the trade deadline approaching and the Reds soft committed to being sellers? We'll see about that. I also want to get into the David Bell situation and why I think the timing has never been more right for a change in leadership. And then I'll be joined by Greg Kuffner, or as you may know him, at Reds Daily 4 on Twitter/X, to talk about all the terrific Reds content he's creating and get his thoughts on the deadline state of the organization and to answer some viewer mail questions. Actually, let's go ahead and kick things off with the viewer mail question. Shout out to Rex Scott from our Patreon family. If you want to join that family, it's patreon.com/riverfrontcincy. Rex asks, Nate, you were talking in our Slack channel about how the Reds should be both buyers and sellers before the trade deadline. Let's hear the Dotson Manifesto. Also, let us know how you and your family are enjoying your new home. Rex, we are loving our new home. Texas is as wild and Texas-like as I could have ever imagined. And we actually got our place sight unseen and are thrilled with it. We were nervous, absolutely terrified, but it worked out perfectly. My wife is loving finally being a physician and no longer a student, which is great. I'm loving that she's making a modest income instead of being a student, so that's nice. And the tequila selection in this state is insane. So I'm here for that. And yeah, man, we're loving it. Thank you for asking, Rex. As for the manifesto, let's dive right in. So as Rex was alluding to, the 2024 MLB trade deadline is next Tuesday, July 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Earlier this month, Reds GM Brad Metter, I don't know, told us in an interview that they were not willing to commit to a deadline strategy just yet. Well, generally lackluster play, followed by a sweep at the hands of a pretty bad Washington Nationals team, one that was just no hit by the Padres and Dylan Cease as I'm recording this. It was their fifth time getting swept coming out of the All-Star break in the last 7 years. That is just wild. Seems like maybe that sweep has them changing their tune a little bit and committing to a strategy. A report came back out on the 21st that the front office has notified other clubs that they are willing to part ways with players on expiring contracts. This should really come as no surprise, as a quick glance at the standings now show the Reds in fourth place in the NL Central, albeit only 4 games back in the wild card. Now, there were some other reports that came out Tuesday, and then I think another one yesterday of the team sort of walking back those statements a little bit. And, you know, I can't say that I'm super shocked that there seems to be some disconnect in the front office, but we'll know one way or the other in the coming days what their plan is, in so much as they have one, I guess. Either way, suffice it to say, this season has been pretty disappointing. Being under 500 at this point, you don't really like having to look ahead to 2025 before the calendar even turns to August. Kind of just makes me sad, but barring another 12-game winning streak, that's probably where we're headed. But hey, I guess anything is possible, even if unlikely. But what is likely are some roster changes heading into this deadline. So who might be wearing a different uniform here in a few days? Well, let's look at those guys on expiring contracts that we know are on the block. There are a handful of what I'm going to call the non-needle movers, and those are all in the reliever pool. Those include names like Justin Wilson, Buck Farmer, and Lucas Sims specifically. There is reason to hope that all 3 of those guys could fetch something in return, but nothing that's going to make us want to hop on for an emergency podcast. That I can guarantee. Despite having some of the nastiest stuff plus profiles out there and a super memorable rainy game battle with an umpire a few years back, I don't think Reds fans are going to miss the Lucas Sims experience too awful much. His ERA and stuff is fine, but it seems like he's letting his inherited runners in every time he gets on the mound. Has been pitching a little bit better lately, so good timing there. Justin Wilson has also not been great. Has some value as a second option lefty reliever, but not really much else, though those types do tend to get moved around this time of the year. But Buck Farmer is kind of an interesting one. He's sneaky been lights out this year to the tune of a 2.80 ERA and a 1.53 ERA plus. That ERA plus meaning he has been 53% better than the league average. He's also on a $2.25 million deal this season, and we know the Castellinis love saving themselves some money. So I would expect all three of those to be gone in so much as they can find takers for them. Quite frankly, every single reliever should be on the table. The Reds aren't really contending. They have a legitimate bullpen depth in the minors. They've got some guys coming back from the IL in the coming days and weeks. Shout out Ian Jabot. Those guys need to play somewhere. And when and if things do turn around next season, you notice I said if, being optimistic. Look at me. They can go get some arms on the cheap. So who else? Who does that entail? Fernando Cruz, for one. He's been a disaster lately. Overuse, perhaps, but he does have one of the nastiest pitches in the league in that splitter. So maybe some teams see something they like and will take that flyer. Sam Mole has been excellent. And just about every team in the league wants a guy like that. That's who the Reds got last year as their big trade deadline acquisition. More on that in a bit. If he's on the team next season, I'm not going to be sad about it. Sam Mole has been terrific. But if you can get something for a lefty reliever, why not? Though he does have a couple more years of team control. But mostly here, I'm talking about Alexis Diaz. Listen, I love Alexis. He's been a lot better after a slow April. But what is the point in a closer if you're only in a closing situation 2 or 3 times a week? And using Fangraphs wins above replacement, our guy is the 95th ranked reliever in baseball. So you might ask yourself, well, can the Reds get anything for him? Well, he's got a famous name. He has been successful each of the previous 2 seasons. And since David Bell just doesn't throw him unless it's in the 9th inning of a safe situation anyway, why not go out and see what you can get? Another bullpen name that I think could maybe get the ball club something decent in return, that's our guy, Nick Martinez. Martinez has a $12 million player option for next season. So depending on how the rest of this one goes, it's certainly possible he leaves anyway. He has been super valuable as a long man in relief, and he's thrown exceptionally well when used specifically in that role. And while it hasn't been great as a starter, his versatility and being able to start at a pinch, as he was supposed to do each of the 2 rained out games from this past week against the Braves, that's going to be appealing to some contending teams, particularly when you start looking at teams like the Baltimore Orioles, whose rotation was just ravaged by injuries this season and have reportedly shown interest in Nick Martinez, as well as the next guy on the list. But before that, what can they realistically get in return for relievers like that? I wouldn't say get your hopes up. Martinez and Diaz could maybe, possibly, perhaps get you a prospect or 2, maybe in an organization's 10 to 20 range. Maybe a former high pedigree guy that never really put it together and needs a change of scenery. Will Benson was that kind of player. Lottery tickets, essentially. Now, there aren't many sellers this year, so I guess there is some realm where Nick Krall can go and do the only thing he's shown any aptitude for and get a decent return. But I wouldn't go getting too awful excited. Moving on from the relievers, as I teased earlier, the Orioles have also been linked to Frankie Montas. And with a $20 million mutual option next season that has about a 0% chance of being picked up, the Reds will try to get literally anything they can in return. Montas has struggled mightily this season, including yesterday's game. He was brutal once again. But if I'm being a salesman here, I'm going to go try to convince teams that the 12 of the 19 starts that he's allowed 3 runs or less is a better representation of who he is than the guy that gets obliterated the other third of the time. I'm not saying I believe that necessarily, but you got to try. He's been very good in this league before, and I can see a team taking a flyer on him. Again, the Orioles, somebody like that they just need arms, much like the Reds kind of did in the offseason. Go take a shot, and starting pitching league wide has been pretty rough, quite frankly. So maybe you can find a suitor, though Frankie's not doing himself too many favors. That's pretty much it from an expiring contract point of view, at least, unless you want to count Austin Slater, and I do not. Everyone else is under team control for multiple years, and they haven't outwardly expressed a willingness or desire to unload what they consider to be their core. Though obviously that could change at a moment's notice. Now, on to what I think they should do. First off, as a rule, everyone should be available. I'd say everyone except for Ellie and Hunter. But shoot, if the Dodgers want to call up and put Shohei on the table, I mean, they should at least be having that conversation, right? Though playing the would you or wouldn't you trade game with Ellie and name your superstar would be a pretty fun exercise for a future podcast. Can't wait to talk Ellie a little more with Greg here shortly. But were I in charge, I would be heavily shopping Jonathan India. There have been some reports lately that other teams are at least interested. These are on the heels of the Reds having a lot of conversations about India before the season, before their depth was just gone overnight. Now, I love young John India, and I want him in his Reds uniform his entire career. I love rooting for that guy, but he has been playing out of his mind, even showing off average to slightly above average defense, and his value might never be higher. So you have to listen. Since May 25th, Jonathan India is first in the National League in batting average and on-base percentage. He's third in OPS and third in FWAR. Shout out to Jizzle James Enthusiast on X for the stats. He his handle's at Jizzle Lover, which I feel weird saying out loud. But listen, you don't have to trade a Jonathan India, but you got to take the calls. They've certainly taken them in the past. The Yankees specifically are apparently showing interest. They came to mind even before that report as a team that is getting terrible production out of both second base and specifically their leadoff spot where Jonathan India has excelled. Right on cue, that report did come out last night. They have some near MLB ready outfield prospects that I would be interested in. Who knows who's actually on the table? I would not give India up for anything less than a massive return because you don't need to trade him. And this season was proof that having a guy like that as depth is can be pretty darn valuable. I guess more than anything, just watching Yankees fans try to talk themselves into Jonathan India straight up for a 28-year-old 8th-round draft pick that's still in single A would be a fair deal for both sides. It would be highly entertaining. We'll see. He's probably the biggest name to keep your eye on. But next, I'd try to sell someone on Jeimer Candelario. Nothing really against the Candyman, but it was a bit of a confusing, albeit somewhat defensible trade at the time. And quite simply, he just hasn't been very good. You could point out to other teams that he's been dealing with that tendonitis, but he seems to be over that hurdle and swinging a little bit better. He was hotter than the sun in May and tends to get hot again around August, at least throughout his career. I don't know. I would try. If I could sign up for a strategy that unloads Jeimer and saves the team his $15 million a year, and then use that money for the free agent outfielder of our dreams, hey, let's make that happen. I'm not saying I believe that they would ever actually invest that money toward improving the team. It's just what I would love to see happen if I could wave my magic wand. And most importantly, and I want to shout this from the rooftops, you don't have to buy or sell, or being the key word there, you don't have to be a buyer or a seller. You can sell and then go buy some dudes. Get rid of all your relievers. Get rid of those guys on expiring deals. Get rid of Jeimer. And then put a hefty chunk of that prospect capital together and go get the elite outfield bat this team desperately needs to contend for a championship. We know the White Sox willing to part with Luis Robert Jr. and Garrett Crochet for that matter. Wouldn't mind having a second ace behind Hunter Green. Put together a package that beats out the Dodgers, the Padres, and whoever else gets in the mix and get it done. A lot of the teams that you keep saying are showing interest in these have been shelling out these kind of prospect deals year after year. You can't convince me they have better systems than the Reds right now. If Brent Rooker is out there in Oakland. The Rockies just love selling dudes. So go see what it would take to pry Brenton Doyle away. The Rays are listening on studs like Randy Arozarena, Isaac Paredes. Like, there's guys. I go back and forth on the Jazz Chisholm option. The swag, the ridiculous swag with him and Ellie would just be off the charts. But if I'm being honest and not at all analytic, I just don't like the cut of his jib very much. But Jesus Sanchez from Miami, now we're talking. That's a guy that I would like. The point is, there are dudes available. Everything in this world doesn't have to be binary, despite what Twitter would love for you to believe. The Reds should sell, absolutely. But they should also be buyers and put this team in a position to truly, truly contend. And that's for a World Series in the next few years, over the next few years. Now, can we look back at the past few deadlines and see if we can glean any information? Well, let's recap the last 5 and see what we can learn. Starting with last year, my goodness, I hate talking about it. It makes me want to drink. 2023 will forever haunt me. The Reds were in first place, 7 games over 500, and all they did was acquire a lefty reliever. Shout out to Sam Mole, who's been very good, but that is absolute front office malpractice. You have to take a shot when you're that close. 2023 was the great sell-off. In the throes of a 100-loss season, the team unloaded fan favorite Luis Castillo, Tyler Mahle, Brandon Drury, Tommy Pham, and Tyler Naquin. And they did so successfully. Nick Krall knocked it out of the park. He restocked the farm system with guys that we now know and mostly love. But they were pure sellers in 22. 2021 was another year that the team was in the hunt for a playoff spot, and they did ever so slightly more than last season, buying 3 relief arms instead of just the one. It was Mikael Givens, Luis Cessa, and Justin Wilson. Deadline. They also sold a couple dudes whose name I'm pretty sure I read for the first time while I was researching the subject. But they were able to bring in our guy, cash considerations. So there's that. But yeah, 2021, no needle movers for a contending team. Great. 2020 was interesting from pretty much every angle. The Reds kind of made the playoffs, if you count that sort of thing. And at the deadline, they did acquire reliever Archie Bradley for, Stuart Fairchild and Josh Van Meter. They got Brian Goodwin from the Angels for Packy Naughton, which is first team all 1930s name. Packy Naughton. I love it. Elite. And that's all they did. Granted, it was weird. They got some guys they don't have anymore. They shipped out a guy that is now back on the roster. 2020 was just weird in baseball and life, all the ways. 2019, though, that was the we are committed to winning now deadline. The team was mostly out, but not completely out of the playoff picture, kind of like they are now. And they went out and got Trevor Bauer. Opinions of Bauer aside, he was arguably the best arm available. They shipped out Yasiel Puig, Tanner Rourke, Taylor Trammell, and Scooter Gennett, with Scooter, Tanner, and Puig all being free agents at year's end. And I think this gives the best blueprint for what I'd like to see happen this trade deadline. They got rid of their expiring contracts, packed their number 1 prospect for a coveted rotation piece, and then they made the team a little bit better for the rest of the season, but much better positioned for the following season and future. The caveat here is that the trade was orchestrated by Dick Williams, who was leading the show then, and we certainly have more evidence that Dick Williams was willing to take some risks to, try to make the actual major league team better. But I don't know. What have we learned? I guess not a ton, really. But we can say that this organization has shown a willingness to buy and sell simultaneously. We've yet to see that with Nick Krall calling the shots. And honestly, we have very little evidence that he can make moves to improve the big league squad and not just their prospect rankings. But maybe it's all part of the plan. Maybe it has been all along, and Nick's just waiting for the right time to pounce. I'm skeptical, but he and Brad Metter have a chance right now to prove even the biggest skeptics among us wrong. And we know there are plenty of skeptics around the riverfront. So all I'll say is, Brad, Nick, get it done. Just get it done. Let's take a quick break. All right, we're back. Now I want to touch on the David Bell saga before we get into the conversation with this week's guest. I have flip-flopped on the should he or shouldn't he be fired question more than the flapjacks on an IHOP flat top. But now I am 100% officially, without caveat, all in on firing David Bell. And here's why. The 2024 Cincinnati Reds are the least fundamentally sound ball club I can ever remember watching. They've committed the fourth most errors in the league after 3 more yesterday. And while I don't have a way to quantify it, they almost certainly lead the league in plays where the outfielders either throw the ball to the wrong base or just simply don't realize a runner is tagging up. Looking at you, Stuart Fairchild. They make stupid mistakes on the base pass nearly every single game. And I am not talking about the inevitable consequences of aggressive game plans. That's fine. You want to let the players play. But how many times have they got picked off a second base? Who gets picked off a second base? The Reds do, and it happens a lot. Now, much of this can be chalked up to being young and inexperienced. That's fine. But what isn't fine is that it doesn't seem to be getting any better whatsoever. And there seems to be zero accountability. Every time David Bell opens his mouth, he spews some nonsense about the guys are playing so well, that they're this close. They just have to take it one game at a time. Blah, blah, blah. Just spouting the same BS nonsense day in and day out. There's no passion, no fire. And no, I don't count getting ejected once a week as passion. You don't get brownie points for leaving work early. I think as Reds fans, we almost unanimously believe that we have a solid core, a solid foundation in place. The team needs someone that's going to light a fire under them. And more than anything else, they need a signal from ownership that lackluster, lackadaisical play will not be tolerated. And there will be consequences. I've seen zero evidence that anyone is held accountable for their mistakes. And boy, oh boy, have there been plenty of mistakes. You know, it came out, was after the team's win on Monday over the Braves, that it was Luke Maley on the bus who laid into the guys and inspired some new life. No shade to Luke, but why is the journeyman catcher who barely plays having to inject life into this team? Well, we have a pretty good idea of who isn't doing that, and it's our cheerless leader, David the Mumbler Bell. Now, is a new manager going to immediately change the direction of the team? Is another guy or gal guaranteed to do a better job than David Bell? No, not at all. But you can't just let poor play, poor decision-making, and poor effort continue with no repercussions. And these are things that fall on the coaching staff, on David Bell and his 383 to 428 losing record as a manager. So let's look at some of the data at just for the heck of it, at midseason firings. And shout out to whoever did the real work on this. It was a random article I found, but I certainly didn't. We'll start with the NFL for no reason other than it was on the Googles and I saw it. But in the NFL, teams win their games 12% more for the rest of the season because they win at a 12% higher clip when the coach is fired mid-season. That's football. How about baseball? I'm going to use an article I found. It was written in 2022. There were 3 or 4 mid-season firings that season, so last year's results were not included, but it goes back to 2002, so I don't think it would move the needle a ton. In 2022, the Phillies fired Joe Girardi mid-season and improved their win percentage by 21%. That's the case I most often point to when I want David Bell to get fired. It immediately turned. That was a team with postseason aspirations, immediately turned them around, and they went to the World Series. That same season, the Blue Jays and Rangers fired their coaches in July and improved their win percentage by 6 and 9%. Or 66 and 91 points, respectively. And since 2002, there have been 37 instances of a skipper being fired mid-season. Those teams, 15 of the 37 notably improved their winning percentage. 20 of them were washes with no notable difference, and only 2 of them actually performed worse under the new manager. So, will firing David Bell make the team better? They'll probably win games at a similar rate that they have so far. But it is more likely that they improve than it is that they get any worse. And I'll take those chances. Now, there are reasons, of course, why all this is moot, and it's just me venting. The Bell family and the Castellinis do have serious ties. If he was to be relieved from the manager role, a quote-unquote promotion to a front office role in the offseason would likely be the route taken. Additionally, David Bell signed that extension last year, and if that promotion doesn't happen, I am more likely to grow all my hair back out than the Reds are to flush money down the drain. All that said, whether it be through moves at the deadline, trades or free agent signings in the offseason, managerial changes. Shockwaves need to be sent through this system to prove to the guys around the league and the guys in the locker room, not even to mention us fans, that the front office and ownership are committed to building a World Series contender. Not just playoffs, not just that third wild card spot, World Series. That the players can get excited about playing in Cincinnati and being part of a, fingers crossed, hopefully one day again soon, a winning culture. And about showing the world just how big of a baseball town Cincinnati, Ohio really is. And, one thing that would go a long way, write a number on a check that even Scott Boras can't advise against and convince the most electrifying player in the game of baseball that playing shortstop in Cincinnati for the rest of your career can be a legitimate path to stardom, success, and the Hall of Fame. All right, let's take another quick break, and then we are going to welcome Greg Kuffner and talk some more Reds. All right, we are back, and I am here with Greg Kuffner, as you all are more likely to know him at Reds Daily 4, some of the single best Reds content on the internet right now. I think, Greg, I started following you around a year or so ago. I was late to the game, and you're one of my favorite check-ins every single day. The guy's coming at us with big league club stuff. We're looking at prospects, and then probably my favorite thing you do right now is – and please let us know when you started this, for big moments and then when the games end and anytime Ellie does something Ellie like, you go and you find the TV call, the radio call for both teams. When did you start doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate you having me. Appreciate you. Appreciate the kind words. I started doing it probably, I think, maybe early this year. I'd randomly grab the radio call or whatnot. I have to watch all the games on MLB TV because I'm out of market, so that helps. MLB TV actually used to have where you couldn't record the screen due to copyright issues, which was a pain. You'd always have to record the audio and then link it up to a video the Reds tweeted out or something like that. But they recently took that off because they which is nice that the MLB lets everybody pretty much use the video. So that's made my life way easier. But when I was doing that, I started listening to some, opposing teams' radio calls. And man, those are always funny because sometimes you have announcers that just feel defeated. The other day when the Reds were playing the Marlins and the Reds had good moments, I felt like the Marlins announcers were rooting for re-signs. Which was bizarre. So you never know what you're going to get. It's been a lot of fun, and it's cool to see everybody interact with those for sure.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So definitely go check those out if you're on Twitter or X. When did you sort of start building this community? You've gotten a nice little following now. Have you been at it for a long time?
Yeah, so I think it was 2021. So I've always been a diehard Reds fan. Grew up as a kid. I'd always watch literally every Reds game like a psycho. And I just always tweeted about them but I had a personal account that I was just tweeting about the Reds to my friends that didn't really care. So I was I would tweet things and literally nobody cared. So I was like, what if I just create, a Reds account and actually try to follow people who, like the Reds, and I can keep up with people that like the Reds. And that's kind of just how it started. And then from there, it's just kind of grown crazily, which is cool. I actually do some social media for my actual job in real life too. So I have some experience, which helps of knowing, how to build that kind of stuff. But it's been pretty cool. I honestly would have never thought if you told me I'd have 9,000 followers or whatever, I'd say that's crazy talk. I actually was at the game on Monday in Atlanta, and I was walking in the concourse, and some lady goes, "Oh my gosh, are you Reds Daily 4?" And I was like, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen." I didn't even know what to say. I was like, "This is so awkward, really." But,
were you by yourself or were you with somebody?
No, I was with two friends, and I don't really I don't really bring it up to people down here. I don't know. I'm just whatever. I just do my thing, and I walk away, and they're like, "So please explain to us what that was about." And I was like, "Oh, here we go. So
I was hoping you'd say you're with somebody. And posting on X is not all you do, right? You starting to do some writing a little bit as well.
Yeah, I've started working for James. I don't even know how to say James's last name, so I'm not even going to say it. James, I think it's
James
Rapine.
Rapine.
Yeah, there you go, James Rapine. And I've started working for him, so I do some writing for there. I do some YouTube stuff. Trying to do like an episode a week or so. I didn't do one this week because I was trying to go to the Braves games that didn't work out too well.
Trying being the
Um,
key word.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, you can find my writing stuff mostly on there, and then um, everything else on Twitter or YouTube kind of stuff. So
Yeah, well, that's awesome, man. Keep it up. I love consuming it. Some of my favorite content out there. Um, Greg, I do this with everybody at the beginning of the show. So let's just do a general vibes check. How are you feeling about the state of the 2024 Cincinnati Reds?
yeah, I love it, man. It's been a roller coaster. I'll tell you that. It's like
Mind, hadn't it?
I was on vacation and the Reds swept the Yankees, and then they got swept against the Tigers, and you're like, okay, you got the Nationals coming out of the break, like win a couple after they took care of the Rockies and Marlins for the most part, and then you get swept against the Nationals, and then the amount of people that said like, hey, the Reds will probably win 2 or 3 against the Braves or sweep the Braves just because that's what this team does, and then sure enough they score 4 runs off Ronaldo Lopez, who hasn't given up 4 runs like all season long. It's just wild. It's really wild, but I think it's almost what the team is at this point. They're just very inconsistent. I think what probably says they're not as great as we probably want them to be, or as good as they want them to be, but they're not awful. They can go in and beat some teams. Their pitching keeps them in a lot of games, which really helps. The offense is just sometimes it's hard to watch. Other times against bad pitching or even good pitching, like Lopez the other night, they can play pretty well. But I think right now they're still in it. They're not out of the playoff hunt yet. I know there's a lot of teams above them in the wild card race, but I think they're only 3 or 4 back. So that's all I can ask for. I mean, we've all dealt with some terrible Reds teams throughout the year, so it could be way worse. Obviously, at the beginning of the year, if you said where the Reds are on July 25th, I would have hopefully said above 500, but they're not. But I'm still optimistic, somewhat optimistic. If you asked me for sure if they would get to the playoffs right now, I would probably say no. But they're in it. They're in it. They're not out of it yet. We're still watching meaningful baseball, and I'll start with that. That's all I can ask for. At least we're not just watching and praying all the prospects come up like previous years. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. It really puts things in perspective. We get so frustrated day to day with, living and dying with this team. You sweep the good teams and you get swept by the bad teams. But it's important to remember that if you go back for the last 20 or 30 years, the amount of times that they have been playing even somewhat meaningful baseball. Let's not pretend they're very good right now, but we can squint and see a path to mattering this season. It doesn't happen very often. It hasn't happened very often. So I guess at least we have that. You mentioned that you tried to go watch some Braves games. Unfortunately, that wasn't quite how you drew it up. Tell us how that went down.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Tell us what you saw.
Yeah, sure. So the battery is that's what they call right outside the stadium. They have shops and restaurants and everything. It's super cool. So if you've never been to Atlanta and you like going to different ballparks, I highly suggest Truist Park. It's pretty cool. They've done a great job down here. So Monday, I went to the game Monday. Cool, got to see a Reds win. Came back, had tickets Tuesday. We got there like an hour early and just literally watched the rain and drank beers on the concourse for a couple hours, which wasn't all too bad. At least we had was with some friends and had a good time. And then yesterday, yeah, exactly. Yesterday, I wasn't planning to go, and I watched game 1. I was like, man, the Reds are never here. Like, I'm gonna go. And I was like, the radar looks terrible, but like maybe if they get it in and I don't go, I'm gonna be mad. And literally paid for parking yesterday. Got out of the car and I got the tweet from I think G-Dub and it said they're postponing the game, and I was like, this is of course they are. But again, I had friends there, so I was at least able to go take in the battery for a little bit and have a couple drinks. But overall, I think it's a cool stadium. I really do think if you've never been to Truist and outside of Truist, they've done a great job with that area, and it's a fun place to watch a game and take in, before the game and after the game and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I'm dying to get down there. I've heard nothing but really good things. But you were at the Hunter Green game, right?
I was, yep, which was awesome. I mean, he just
That's
absolutely shoved.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to watch him live when he's dealing like that, and to see him do it against the Braves lineup is struggling right now, but that is a lineup that has big league hitters and a lot of them.
Yeah,
You go out
for
and
sorry. But yeah, I was gonna say, like, what I thought was so cool about the Hunter Green start was when he walked, I forget who it was in the seventh, and he probably had 110 pitches already. I mean, 9 out of 10 times David Bell's coming to get the pitcher right there.
Mhm.
But he just, it was like, Hunter Green he's just dealing today. You could see how bad Hunter Green wanted it. He left him in there, and Hunter, delivered and it was the first or second pitch of the at bat. He got a pop up and went 7 innings and walked off the mound, and he was fired up as ever. So I thought
Yeah.
that was super cool because 9 out of 10 times, David Bell would have came out and said, "We're going to the
Mhm.
bullpen here." But to let him finish that and just how good he was just a really cool moment, I thought, the other day.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't believe David Bell stayed with him. It seems like he has, as fans, we're always rooting to leave him in.
Yeah,
Let him go. We
exactly.
want to see it happen. It seems like he has done the opposite every single time. So I think what we witnessed here is just Hunter Green has taken that legitimate step, or steps, I should say, because I think he is absolutely in the ace conversation now. He has been the best pitcher in baseball throughout all of July so far, and that includes Dylan Cease, who just threw a no hitter. Um, we get to have it. We always talk about Ellie, and we're going to talk about Ellie next, but we have a guy who is sort of the pitching version of Ellie as far as prospect status goes. Like, this guy was the cover of Sports Illustrated, and for whatever reason, we could go on for hours. It seems like a lot of people just weren't willing to give him any rope. And Hunter said he didn't care. I'm just going to show up and shove and be that all-star and become an ace right before your eyes. So it's really cool that you got to see him live, and you also got to see Will Benson doing special things. And we've had a hard time on this podcast this year because, I don't know, like most people, we just fell in love with Will Benson from just about day one.
Yeah,
And
he's a
then
very
to watch
likable
him,
guy.
yeah, to watch him struggle has been so tough. But you got to see him in front of his home crowd, um, bringing some life. Was that fun to watch? Will, could you sense it that he had some relief?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when he's playing well, I mean, he puts the big smile on his face, and even when he caught that ball in left field, he did the little like extra, I'm going to hop the fence. It made it a little bit more dramatic. I mean, I think when he's playing well, he gives the team kind of a different energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's been weird. I did see a tweet today. I think it was by Bryce Spalding, but he put out, if you look at his Benson's like WRC plus every month, it's really, his June was awful, like all time awful. But the rest of the months, he's actually been decently, at least average, pretty much. I
Yeah.
think May might have been a little below average, or April, one of the two.
But I think it was
But
April, and it was just a little, like
yeah,
like
like 97 out of
90 or
100, I
something. Yeah.
think. But so, which is interesting to say, because if you just say to most people like Will Benson this year, how's he been? Everyone's just going to be like, he's been awful. He's hitting 180
Disaster.
and whatever. But if you look at it like that, it was just June was so bad. I mean, he went through he was like it felt like a couple different stretches where he was like 0 for 20. So it's just been a weird year for him. It's been a weird year. He started out the year hitting against lefties, which I think was bad for him. That I think wrecked his confidence a little bit. Then they got him back into his platoon role, and he was playing okay. And then June was just a nightmare. And now it seems like he's playing better in July. So it was cool to see Benson have some success. The Reds are a different offense when he's playing well. I mean, they really
Yeah.
are, because he can hit for power, he can run, he can kind of do it all out there.
Yeah, as electric as Ellie is, it seems like the team feeds off Will Benson's energy as much, if not more. So we are just hoping and praying he gets kind of just gets his mojo back and sustains this for the rest of the season. Because if he can be that guy, if he can be anywhere close to that guy, it really just gives this team a lot of options that we've all been missing.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
impact bat in the outfield. So we got to talk about Ellie a little bit. I think he did some pretty fun things while you were there. He has been on an absolute tear. Watching him become, arguably the front runner for NL MVP. I think you can make an argument. I'm not saying I would, but you could. Um, at this age is unlike anything I've ever seen. Like, how are you feeling just about the LA experience in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. It really is truly incredible. Like, you look a year ago, he came up and set the world on fire, and then throughout the last month or two of the season, he really struggled. Um, and everybody, I mean, he was 21, yeah, he was 22, like, and everybody points to the strikeouts and the errors, and like, it's kind of like the Hunter Green effect. It's like these guys are kids. Like, we need to let them, we need to let them grow and need to let them work into it. And this year, if you would have said he has the numbers he has right now, I'd have called you crazy. I mean, absolutely crazy. He's
Right.
22 years old. He's got 46 extra base hits. He's got 51 stolen bases. His OPS is like 850. It's just incredible. I mean, he's literally leading this offense at 22 years old. He's lived up to the hype already, and he's only going to get better. He's not going to have 20 years every year. I don't think he's not going to. Um, he's just going to get better. He's just going to continue to get better, and he's so much fun to watch. I actually got a cool little story. I said I went to was going to go to the night game yesterday, and the friends I met up with, they were Braves fans, and my friend's kid said when the Reds were up big, he was rooting for Ellie to get a cycle, even though it would hurt the Braves, just because it would be so cool. Which just again shows like
Yeah.
Ellie, he just has fans. Every kid is like, I love that guy, which is
Yeah.
so awesome for the Reds to have a player like that. Because even like in Votto, with how great like Joey Votto was, he didn't really have that personality and like the exciting parts of the game like Ellie
Sure.
does, where like he's sprinting and stealing and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool to see someone like Ellie, where Major League Baseball is putting graphics out about Ellie like every day, because the Reds haven't had that in a long time. So, I mean, he's lived up to the hype. He's been incredible. Even when the Reds are down like 10-2 and Ellie steps up to the plate, I'm still excited to watch him hit. He's just amazing.
Well, we were talking about those videos that you put together, and my favorite ones are the ones with Ellie because, like you were saying, the opposing broadcasts are all the time just like they're in awe too. They're as speechless as we all are.
Yeah, they can't
And
believe it. It's incredible.
we get to root for this guy for the better part of the next decade, hopefully beyond, but we don't need to get into that here. Play out, but you're down there, Atlanta. That's a team that has had some success locking up their young superstars. So we'll see. We'll keep holding out hope, but we have been so fortunate to have Elliot to root for. Greg, we'll take a real quick break, and then we'll get right back at it. All right, let's jump into a little bit of draft talk. I don't follow the draft that closely. I'm not sure that how big of a college sports fan you are, but there's still some stuff we should cover here. Specifically, the one big burning topic: the Reds surprised most of Cincinnati fandom by taking Chase Burns over Charlie Condon. We needed an outfielder. They went with a pitcher. I mean, I can't remember the gentleman's name. Their director of amateur scouting said afterwards, like, "Hey, we like pitchers and we like middle infielders. That's the profile we target." So I guess we shouldn't have been as surprised as we were. But what was your gut reaction when when that notification popped up that the Reds went with Burns?
Yeah, well, I think I've said pretty much all year, and I'm with you. I don't follow college baseball much. I follow once they become prospects, like now that they're in the Reds organization, I'll follow them like crazy. But I just don't pay attention to the college game a ton. I do watch a little bit of the College World Series because that's pretty fun. But I said all year I wanted Bazana or Condon, basically, is who I wanted the Reds to take. But when they picked Burns, I wasn't shocked. I kind of wasn't shocked. And then I talked myself into it. Like, I think deep down I wanted Condon because he's electric and he can hit bombs, and you just think of that happening at Great American Ballpark, and you just talk yourself into this is going to be amazing. But when you really think about it, it's so much easier for the Reds to get. I say this now as we're struggling to find some outfield bats, but generally there's a lot more outfield bats than potential 1-2 starters or 1-2-3 starters. Not many pitchers are going to want to come to pitch at Great American Ballpark unless you overpay them. Probably someone like Frankie Montas or Nick Martinez. Like, both of those guys, Martinez has had a good year. Montas has been inconsistent, but we probably overpaid for both of them to come to Great American Ballpark and pitch. So I've talked myself into it. I mean, he averaged 17 strikeouts per 9 innings in college, which is pretty crazy, which just tells you his stuff plays. He did give up some home runs, but I'm not really too concerned about that. Some college dimensions are weird. The ball was flying out of the park in college baseball this year, so some people are thinking the ball was kind of juiced and whatnot. Teams hit 175 against him, so that's pretty strong. Listen. I think if the Reds felt that strongly about him that they were going to take him over one of those top two guys that everybody thought were the top two in the draft, I think I can be talked into it because we can never have enough pitching. Again, like we talked about earlier in the show of how many bad years the Reds had. How many of those years were the Reds throwing out like Luke Weaver, and Mike Minor, and guys is like sometimes we've had guys like that be like our number 3 starter, and now this year you have Abbott, Lodolo, and Green, and then just to keep building that in the minors and have Burns and have Louder. And that's not even talking about guys like Connor Phillips, who's obviously struggled this year, but Chase Petty and those guys, like I'm all for. You can never have enough starting pitching. And if you ever do have 10 just amazing starting pitchers, you can always trade that starting pitching and get something for it because we'll see it at the deadline this year. Someone will way overpay for starting pitching. And, I mean, look, the Reds got CES and Spencer Steer for Tyler Mahle, and also Will Benson turned into that because people will overpay for starting pitching. So I talked myself into it. I'm excited to watch him pitch. It looks like the Reds are going to allow him to pitch a little bit in the organization this year, which would be cool because they shut Louder down last year. But yeah, I'm all for it. I did want Condon at first, but I think it was just because of how exciting it is to watch guys hit bombs.
Yeah, I think we were sort of victims of having so much time to stew over it because Condon was so good all season long that we had all talked ourselves into it already. And it just seems so obvious, but you can get corner outfielders. You can take guys and turn them into corner outfielders, but you can't get top of the rotation starting pitching. So I'm with you. I've had to talk myself into it. And I know that I don't watch enough college baseball to get fired up about something like that anyway. Whether or not I trust the Reds front office to make the right decision is a different case, but they've done better lately. And I can see a rotation with Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo and Rhett Louder and Chase Burns and Brandon Williamson, Chase Petty, who started out rough this year, but has been pretty good lately. I mean, you don't have to look too hard to get, the makings of a potential elite, like top 3 in the majors rotation. You could argue they have a top 3 now, at least in the NL. So we're going to try to get excited about it. It's baseball, so all we ever do is talk ourselves into these things. Time will tell. How do you think the Reds fared overall with the rest of their draft, and do you think it sort of impacted how their prospect standing?
It seems like they got a lot of guys who like at the beginning of the year were projected to go higher, and then they kind of fell, which I kind of like. It tells me they have upside, and maybe just had a couple things go wrong this year, or they feel like something went wrong that they can fix, or whatever it may be. The rankings are always weird. Like I know MLB Pipeline always kind of overrates the draft class that season. I'm sure the top three round guys will all be plugged in immediately in the top 15 for Pipeline. Now, I don't know. It's hard to rank. It's hard to rank 30 guys, whether it's minors or college, and really, so maybe you're just putting people in spots. But I do think, I mean, you're taking a guy number 2 overall. Chase Burns is going to slide right up there. And I know they felt good about some of their other top 5 round draft picks. So it seems like from what other people that I follow seem to like what they did, and there's been some columns out there that said the Reds have done good. Again, I probably don't follow it quite enough to really say like I think they did amazing or I think they did not as good. But from what everybody else is saying, it seems like they did pretty good. But the draft is all kind of a crapshoot. It's gotten better now that you have all the analytics that you can pull and all the stat casts that you can say, okay, this guy has major league stuff. But still, you just never know. You might have a second round draft pick that never makes it to the show. So it's kind of all you just really never know with the draft.
Yeah, it seems like they've done pretty well the last couple. So whether it was an organizational strategy shift or something. I'm optimistic that they can keep getting decent production out of these guys. They took several college bats that seem like are relatively close to being ready. So like maybe they wanted some quick depth in the upper two levels of the minors because that's where they've kind of been lacking right now. I don't know, but let's talk about something you do know a lot about. And I asked you to come up with your 3 favorite prospects and 1 big sleeper.
You did.
Sorry for asking you to do homework. That was rude of me, but who'd you come up with?
No worries at all. Well, you mentioned the Reds have some not great talent in the middle of the organization, kind of in the minors. Chattanooga might be the worst team I've ever laid eyes on. They're like 25-60 or something like that. Their social team does a good job, and when they win, it's like if they won the World Series, which is never a good thing. But I'll start out with Sal Stewart. I'm a huge Sal Stewart fan. He's, for those who don't know, he's in high A with the Dragons. Guy just hits. He'll take it the other way. He walks a lot. He doesn't strike out a lot. I did an interview with Tom Nichols, who does broadcasting for the Dragons. I think he's like the director of media relations. And he said Sal's one of those guys, when he's on your team, you love him. If he's on the other team, like, he's kind of cocky a little bit and confident. And I was like, I love that. Like, give me that all day.
We never have those guys.
Yeah.
Because so,
he doesn't hit a ton of home runs for his size. He's got 8 home runs, I think, this year. I think he could maybe turn into like a Jesse Winker, where as he gets older, Jesse Winker never hit many home runs in the minors, but he'd always have like a 400 on base percentage. Yeah. But then as he got into the majors, he kind of found that power. And Sal Stewart's still only 20 years old, so he's only going to grow. He's probably, I think he's my first player that I really stands out to me for Sal, or for my top prospects.
Big fan of Sal.
Yeah, number 2, I would say Edwin Arroyo. I love Edwin Arroyo. Obviously, he got hurt. He probably won't play at all this season, which really stinks. Anytime you take a top prospect and just lose a year of development, it's pretty rough. I'm interested to see how he's not very big, so I'm interested to see how his power will play at the upper levels of the minors, and once he gets to the majors, hopefully. He's really skilled defensively. He uses his speed a lot. He's fun to watch. I loved watching Edwin Arroyo last year. The second half of the year, he just played really good. It'll be interesting again where the Reds will put him if he does get up there, because
that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, he's played so much shortstop. I don't know how you can move Ellie away from shortstop at this point. He's number third, I think, outs above average, even with 20 years, which is just insane.
It's madness.
Yeah, so I don't know, and maybe maybe Edwin Arroyo is someone that the organization is okay with, giving up for somebody because they don't know where they would put him. But he's probably my second favorite guy. Again, it stinks that he won't be able to play this year at all.
Yeah, he was super hot in spring training too. He
showed a ton of promise in spring training.
A little earlier than scheduled until that happened. So get well soon, Edwin.
Absolutely. And then the third, Hector Rodriguez, who we got from the Tyler Naquin trade.
Speaking my language, I was hoping you'd say this.
If he turns out to be something, we got someone from Tyler Naquin, that's going to be just absolutely incredible.
Highway robbery.
And he's got a 759 OPS. He's got 9 home runs this year. He's hitting 288. He's only walking 4.6% of the time, which he probably needs to walk a little bit more. That's some like CES type stuff. But what's crazy is he walks 4.6% of the time. He strikes out 11% of the time. So he never strikes out. And again, when I was interviewing with Tom, he said Tom's like, he has a knack, almost like someone like Vladimir Guerrero, where he just swings at pitches that are outside the zone because he chases a lot, but he just hits them. And he's had such good like hand-eye coordination that he can, barrel up baseballs that nobody should be able to barrel up. It's always interesting to see if that will play as pitchers get better up in the higher, leagues. But he's been so fun to watch. It'll also be kind of interesting to see. He's another guy that's pretty short. I don't know if he's like 5'9", 5'10". But that it's always so interesting to see how guys, shorter guys like that play as they get into bigger competition. But man, he's fun to watch. That Dragons team just has a lot of guys who you tune into that lineup and you just go down the lineup and you're excited to watch one after the other. So he would be the third one that I'm really excited about. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him at Double-A before the season ends.
Yeah, a couple of these guys don't seem like they have much to prove. The Reds have just been lacking that really high contact type of player. It seems like for several years now. I think one of the reasons I gravitated towards your Twitter account was because your picture was Alejo Lopez, and I
Yes.
was constantly on this podcast just screaming "Free Alejo, free Alejo!" Like this is the bottom of the ninth. I at least want somebody that's going to put it in play. Big Alejo Lopez fan, but Hector Rodriguez is like Alejo Lopez if he had top
Some
3
pop.
percentile talent. Like the guy's got
Right.
all the pedigree. He can go deep. I'm glad you mentioned him. It's been a bit of a down year for him compared to what I was hoping for, but I think I've just built him up in my mind so much. But he's probably my favorite prospect in the entire
Yeah, and
organization.
anytime you go from low A to high A and you continue to see numbers is a good thing, because I always say like high A for me is it's really maybe even double A is like when you really start paying attention, like are guys continuing to do it, because that's when the talent gets a lot better. Like low A is kind of like half these guys might not even ever make it to high A, let alone double A, whatever. So it's been cool to see him do well. My sleeper, who I'm going to go with, is Julian Aguilar. Who is
we have
on,
not talked about him in a while.
Yeah, so he's one I don't think gets a lot of praise now. He's not going to come in and ever be like a number one or number two starter, but I think he could be like a Carson Spires type pitcher who just goes out there and gets it done. He doesn't have, I don't think he doesn't have like nasty stuff where he strikes out a ton of guys, but one thing with the Reds pitching prospects, a lot of those guys have a lot of problems throwing strikes. Like Connor Phillips, Chase Petty can be like that from time to time. Lyon Richardson struggles with walks. Aguilar just kind of comes in and throws strikes, and it seems like every time you look at his box score, he went 6 innings and maybe gave up 2 runs, struck out 4, struck out 5, and gets the job done. He just kind of seems like a gamer. And it reminds me of someone like, that's kind of what Spires did last year before he got forced up to the big leagues, when he never should have been up there last year. But you can see how well he's done at the major league level this year of just being that guy who comes in and throws strikes and locates. And I just thought he was a kind of cool one to throw in there, because his upside may not be there. Like he's not going to come in and ever be a 1-2 starter in the majors. But I do think he can be a part of the major league team that, whether it's a 4 or 5 starter or he's a long reliever out of the pen. I just really like what he offers. He's really kind of been really consistent throughout the minors, and he finally got the AAA a couple weeks back, and he's done pretty much the same in AAA that he's done everywhere else, which has been awesome to see.
Well, this season has been, as much proof as we need that you might think you have a lot of depth, and all of a sudden you don't. So having arms like that could come in and successfully fill in that 4 or 5 starter role, not somebody that you're just plugging in because you have to, and then they're gone and we never see them again, but like a legitimate arm. I mean, this guy was the minor league pitcher of the year, the organizational pitcher of the year last year. And I don't think I had heard of him until they announced that.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times, like that's the thing with prospect rankings too. Like they're less likely to put a guy that doesn't have like the nastiest stuff on there. Like for instance, even like Jacob Hurtubise, like they put him on there just because they had to after he hit like 400 last year, but he's not a flashy player like at all. So they don't, prospect rankings are like, we're going to put guys who have a ton of upside and could be like the next star. But so I think they're biased towards that, which is why you don't see a ton about some of those guys that don't have the upside like that. But he's just been solid everywhere he's been. And I think sometimes that's what you're just wishing for, like just the consistency, as opposed to, going out and giving up 8 runs and then shut out, and then 8 runs and shut out, or whatever it may be. So
yeah, having that ceiling is awesome, but raising that floor can be just as important.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, appreciate you doing that. If it's all right with you, let's hop into some viewer mail questions, because they were pretty much all about the trade deadline coming up. So no need to bury the lead. Let's jump right into it. As always, these are actual questions and actual viewers from our Patreon family. If you would like to join the Patreon family for as little as $2 a month, that's patreon.com/riverfrontcincy. We're having a good time over there, talking all kinds of crazy stuff. So love to have anybody and everybody. All right. Our first question comes from Sydney Price. Cindy says, which player is the most likely to get traded? I'll let you take this one first. Who do you think is the most likely?
Man, one player. I don't know who I would say if there's one player. Maybe I'm going to cheat and say one of the relievers. I'm going to say like a Lucas Sims, Buck Farmer type whose contract is up after this year, a rental that I think one thing we haven't even touched on is how good the starting pitching has been, but how good the bullpen's been and how much depth they have in the bullpen. I mean, they got Yasver, I don't even know how to say his last name, Zulueta.
Nobody does. Scholars maintain the translation was lost.
Yeah, he's been incredible in AAA. You got Zach Maxwell in AAA. You got Legumina, who hasn't been great when he's been in the majors, but he's still probably a major league arm. That he's been buried in AAA down there. Tony Santillan just came up. Like, it's crazy that the depth. So I almost think, like, if you trade a couple of these bullpen arms, you're not really missing a beat. And you could even make a fact that, like, bringing up someone like Zach Maxwell is making your bullpen better, or more upside maybe. So I would probably say the most likely to get traded, I don't know exactly which one, but probably one of the bullpen arms, or maybe even someone like Justin Wilson. But just one of the bullpen arms that a team needs, whether it's a lefty or righty or something along those lines, because the Reds have a lot of depth, and I think they can get rid of that position and maybe get something back and not necessarily lose a whole lot if they still want to try to get the wild card spot.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty safe bet that I think it was Buck Farmer, Wilson, and Sims are all free agents at the end of the year. So they'll certainly try to get rid of those guys. Ian Jabot's coming back, so that's another piece. Brent Suter's going to be back eventually. I'm going to go with Nick Martinez. I think he's probably going to be the most highly coveted of those arms just because of his versatility and how good he's been in the bullpen role when he's been able to pitch that out of that role. And he does have a player option. So there's no guarantee that he's even around next year. Now, I don't know how many teams are lining up to pay him $12 million a year, but maybe there are. And if that's the case, I could see the Reds. I could definitely see somebody, the Orioles were linked to him. And there'll be teams that want what he does, whether or not they can make it happen. We'll see. All right. Next question comes from Nathan Sturworth. He says, I hope the Reds do not trade India to the Yankees. They always rip off the Reds. The Reds got nothing in return for Aaron Boone, Denny Nagel, or Aroldis Chapman. How do you all feel about the India trade rumors? So I touched on this on the first part that I recorded before you hopped on. The long story short of it is I want Jonathan India to be a Red for his entire career, but they need to be having long phone calls with all of these teams.
Yeah.
What do you think about these rumors?
Yeah, man, it's tough. I think, I'll be honest, like in the offseason, I was probably one of the guys that said, like, if you can get something good from Jonathan India, like maybe look to trade him, which is hilarious because how good he's been this year and how injured we got. Like, again, you thought CES was going to be here all year. You thought Matt McClain was going to be here all year. You thought Noelvi Marte was going to be, and then all those guys were wiped out. And it was like, now Jonathan India is the only consistent guy playing. And he's been playing unbelievable, which has just been awesome. I have a hard time with it. I love Jonathan India as a player. I think he's been so good for the Reds this year at the top of the lineup. I'm almost to the point when Friedel comes back, like just keep adding India at top of the lineup and find someone else for Friedel. Yeah. But at the same time, like I totally do understand, like if the Reds truly think, and this is where it's hard because I know fans don't want to hear this type of stuff, but like if the Reds truly don't think they're going to make the wild card and they don't think they're going to make the playoffs, Jonathan India's value as a trade target will probably never be this high because he's playing absolutely unbelievable. So if you want to go that route, I can see why they would do that. I have a hard time thinking they would actually do it only like 3 games out of the wild card unless they were just blown away. Getting someone like Dominguez from the Yankees, one of their top prospects, then I would be like, I would probably talk myself into it because again, like it's hard to get rid of these players and you love them and you want them to stay Reds forever. But as a small market team, you don't get guys to re-sign with you a lot. And if a team's going to give you a top prospect for a guy who's having, I mean, let's face it, before the year, Jonathan India probably wouldn't have got us much in anything in return. And he's come out and just had an unbelievable couple of months. And now a team's going to offer you their top prospect in the organization. I'm with you. You have to at least listen. And you just never know what teams are going to do at the deadline because like you said, Nick Martinez, you joke of who's going to pay him, but like we forget how bad some of these teams that are in the rotation, like how bad their pitching is, or how bad they need a second baseman, or how like some of these guys that plays for these teams, like they have big gaps. So yeah, it's tough. The India conversation is tough because when you say they should trade him, it feels like you're hating on the guy, and the fans don't want to hear that. But you do if you take the love for the guy out of it, and you look at the organizations, like what's best for the organization in the future. I'm with you. If you have to look at it if a team's offering you just an unbelievable package. Now, with all that being said, I don't think he'll get traded, but we'll see. I mean, you just never know around the trade deadline.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite times of the year. Well, as a baseball fan, it's one of my favorite times of the year. It rarely is as a Reds fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, also, he would look terrible having to cut his hair and shave his face. He's not meant to be a Yankee. I don't like it. And I will
didn't
say
even think about that part of it. Yeah, that would be absolutely wild. Jonathan Didi with short hair.
And I don't remember what the return for Denny Nagel was, but Aaron Boone wasn't going to get you much. And when they traded Aroldis Chapman, it wasn't really a classic. We're trading a stud at the peak of his value kind of deal. He was going through some stuff, Nathan.
Yeah.
All right. Cal Kapler says, what would your reaction be if they actually sold? Besides India and maybe Fraley, I don't see them selling anything substantial besides a couple of bullpen guys and maybe Montas Martinez. A deck shuffling might actually be beneficial to trim some fat. We've kind of expressed our feelings on this anyway. I will just add that I'm fully on team trade Jamer Candelario. I don't dislike Jamer, but it's a seller's market. There are not many teams selling this year. And if you can find a way to get some kind of return that makes sense and get his money off the books and go get a more high impact outfield bat in the offseason, then I would be open to that sort of thing. Otherwise, I agree with Kyle. I think it's going to be just sell off the expiring contracts and maybe another pitcher, and that's all we're going to see. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what's easy to forget when you see the Reds struggle this year, and I know people are going to say it's excuses. It's the front office is never good enough. The coaching's not good enough, but the Reds' young core is still pretty good. Now, obviously, you don't know for sure what you have in Marte, what you have in CES. You think you know what you have in McLean, but still, really, he's just had one good year. So, like, but with that being said, you don't think all three of those guys are just going to be terrible. So you like to think the Reds' young core is still pretty strong. And those are just three guys who, two of them been out for the majority of the season. Marte's just come back. So I don't think they're going to go out and just – it's not going to be like, here's another rebuild. We're shooting for 2027. So I'm with you. I think I could see Candelario, someone like that, because, again, that's a position you think you could fill, and they have guys right now, if healthy, that could fill them. And then guys like Montas and bullpen and maybe Martinez. But I don't see them trading anybody. India would be the only one that has a couple of years of control left, other than Candelario as well, that I don't see them trading anybody else that has, substantial amount of years left, because it just doesn't make sense. They put all this effort into having a good young core. They're not going to give up on it after 1 year that they were riddled with injuries.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, the next question comes from Hooper Pal. Hooper always has the best question. He says, if you could pick one band to sing the Reds theme song, who would it be? And sorry, somebody already grabbed the lead singer of Creed. All right, who's your one band that could sing the hypothetical Reds theme song? The Reds.
I looked at this question for like 15 minutes. I was like, I have no idea. I think this is the wrong question for me, I think. But I'm going to go with, I'll say Journey. I'll say Journey. Okay. We're going to go classic. We just need a classic Red song. The Reds were good back in the day. Big Red Machine. So we'll just go classic Journey. And anything's better than the song I'm a Reds fan, because that song, I don't like that song at all, and it's very annoying. So
you can't go wrong with Journey. No way. I'm going to throw out two options. One, actually, they're both because of the main members of their band are Reds super fans. So 98 Degrees, nice. Nick Lachey. I mean, it's going to be beautiful. And then I'm going to throw out my actual favorite, and that is the Soggy Bottom Boys, led by George Clooney. But it's got to be in the Soggy Bottom Boys style, Man of Constant Sorrow style. So there you go.
Nice.
All right, Joey Gaditza says, just for conversation's sake, if the Reds go into Tampa and sweep the Rays, let's just say, does that make them more inclined to buy or stand pat at the deadline? Actually, let's package these next two together. No, let's package the next three. So James Urban says, anyone else have a feeling this year will be crickets at the deadline for the Reds, or is that just me? We don't really have major league ready or close prospects to give up, and most of our current team right now are not top tier on the market. And then Rich Thompson says, gentlemen, the trade deadline is coming up. And with that said, what is the likelihood percentage-wise? Do you see the Reds do the following? Be sellers, be buyers, or do nothing and stand pat? So these are all kind of similar. I figured we could lump them in. Do you think a strong performance against Tampa Bay should dictate whether they become buyers or sellers?
I would say it should dictate at least a little bit of, hey, we maybe we should actually be a little bit more aggressive and go get somebody, because if you sweep them, you're most likely only going to be a couple spots out of like 1 or 2 games out of the race. So I would say maybe it would dictate being aggressive. I think regardless if the Reds are going to go get somebody, they're only going to look at guys who have more than 1 year of control. I really don't see them giving up prospects for someone that's going to be a rental. It just doesn't really make sense. And even like in years past, like when the Reds went and traded for Trevor Bauer, like I think people forget, like the Reds weren't good that year. The year they went and got Trevor Bauer, but he was good the next year and helped them make the playoffs that year. So I think it's things like that, or even last year with Sam Moll. Obviously they were in it last year, but now not only they got Moll last year, but they could have him this year and for years to come. So I think the Reds are always going to look at guys who have some control under them, which ultimately that's going to cost more as well. But at least you're not just giving up prospects for half a season. I talked about the Tyler Mahle trade earlier. The Twins, I think he had 1.5 years left on his deal, and then he pitched for a half a season. Then he got Tommy John, and the Twins basically got nothing for him, which is like the last thing. They traded, 2 guys who ultimately are starters on the Reds. Obviously, CS hasn't played, but for basically, I don't know, 50 innings maybe of Tyler Mahle. And that's just what you'd never want to be part of or on the wrong end of, especially as a small market team. You never want to be the team who traded Fernando Tatis for James Shields. So that's the part that goes wrong. I know people always want to say, like, don't hold the prospects, like make the trade. But like at the same time, if you trade Fernando Tatis Jr. for an old James Shields, like the front office will get railed for that too. So it's kind of like a can't win, can't thing. But I think ultimately, they're going to look for people, whether they go in and do great for the Rays series or they win 1 of 3, whatever it may be. I think they'll still maybe be on the lookout for somebody that's controllable. And I don't think this front office is going to overpay. I think they're very cautious, and I think they're trying to build it, whether you agree or whether you disagree. I think they're trying to build the big league organization through the minor leagues and then add on to it from trades or free agency, et cetera.
Yeah, we're over here at the Riverfront. We're pretty staunchly, improve the major league club, but it's been hard to argue with some of the success from what Carl's done this past couple of years. And what we keep wanting to see is, can he make the move that not just makes the organizational prospect rankings better, but make the big league club into a legitimate World Series contender. And I've been screaming it from the mountaintops. You don't have to just buy or sell. You can do both.
Yeah,
when you mentioned the Trevor Bauer year, it was 2020, 19 or 20. They were similar to this year. They were kind of out of it, not completely, but pretty much out of it. And they made that move. They sold off their expiring deals, got the best arm available. Like, I keep just praying to the Reds gods above that they'll go out and put something together for a legitimate stud. Like, I can give up prospect capital for a Luis Robert Jr. and Garrett Crochet. Go get them both and do something crazy. But we haven't seen that kind of thing happen yet. But
and I think with those guys, like, again, those guys, especially like Luis Robert, like, he's under control. So that's a guy that you're willing to give up some guys for, because you're going to have him for a couple of years. You're not just going to have him for a half season. And I think everybody wants to throw out Brent Rooker from the A's. Like, he is going to cost a ton. Like, I think he could. I would even argue he could cost more than Luis Robert Jr. because of the year he's having. I think he's got like 3.5 years remaining on his deal. So you're getting a guy, if he keeps up, like, you're getting him for 3.5 years. Like, the A's aren't just going to hand him off just because they're bad this year. They're still going to want to make sure, like, hey, we're going to get a good return here. Even with as bad as the A's organization is, I think, you're not just going to hand him off. But yeah, it's all, I know there's a million different takes about, the trade deadline. It's always a hot topic, but I do think I would be all for the Reds going to get somebody like that. Even me, I'm probably like a prospect hugger, so I'm maybe the opposite of you guys a little bit. But I think that's just because I watch him so much, and you believe in guys that just because you watch them and you're like, oh, they can put it together. But I would be I would love, even like someone like Jazz Chisholm Jr. would be electric to me. Like, I know he has some attitude issues and whatnot, but I'm like, him and Ellie on the same field would just be like incredible. And yeah, so I would be all for it. I don't know if I see it happening, or I don't know if I see the Rays series impacting it a ton, but it'll be interesting regardless to see what they do.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. Rich Thompson did ask us to put some percentages on that. So, Rich, I'm going to say they are going to lean 70% towards sellers, 20% towards buyers, and 10% that they do nothing and stand pat. But I really don't think I should put it 0% that they'll stand pat. They're going to get rid of some of those arms. They're going to be free agents, and they've got guys coming back. So 70-30, they'll sell more than they buy. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think they'll at least make one move, so I'll put it at 0 that they stand pat. I'll just to say something different than you. I'll say 65% that they'd be sellers. I'll say 35 that they're buyers, but even buyers are a relative word. I think does going to get Austin Slater count you as a buyer? Because I could see them making like a move like that in the trade deadline. Probably not. Doesn't really count you as a buyer going to get, Austin Slater. I could see them getting like a bat like that somebody gives up on or something. But I just don't think they'll go get something big with them being 3 or 4 games out of the wild card. But again, like I said, I'd probably be all for it depending on what they're giving up. But yeah.
Well, it's going to be exciting either way. We're trade deadline, whether your team makes a move or not, just being able to sort of hang tight for the last 48 hours as things roll in, and those instant reactions are always super, super fun. So if you're not following the Riverfront on Twitter, you should definitely be following Greg, because he's going to come at you with the analytics and the stats that, we're more reactionary, not analytical over here. So thank you so much for coming on. This is an awesome, awesome conversation. You can come on back anytime. And please, before you head out of here, let the people know where all they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Been a great time talking Reds. I could talk Reds all day, probably way too much. Reds Daily 4 on X. Queen City Sports is what it's called on YouTube. And then you can see all my stuff on CincinnatiRedsTalk.com is where I write, the articles about some prospects and post-game recaps and that type of thing. So
nice. And I'll put all that information down in the show description. So if you're looking at it that way, that'll be in there. And thanks again, man. I appreciate it. And everybody stay tuned. We'll be checking in throughout the next week as the trade deadline gets here on Tuesday, and go Reds. So thank you, everyone, for listening and supporting the Riverfront. Tell your friends. Please remember to subscribe, like, follow, do all that good stuff. We are at all the places. We are at Riverfront Cincy. And once again, a huge, huge thank you to our supporters at patreon.com/Riverfront Cincy. Show would not be possible without the support of that family. And if you'd love to join the hijinks, patreon.com/Riverfront Cincy, or click the link in the show notes. Shout out to Adam Dunn. Shout out to Lisa Alberto, Dwayne Cranchicky, and Eli Cash. For Greg Kuffner and Alejo Lopez, this is Nate Dotson saying so long, Cincinnati.